where I sit with my gloves and do quite a lot of sort of making and planning. A lot of the work that I do is sort of large scale outside in cities and landscapes, and so here is really a room for planning and thinking things through and making sort of small scale works, as it were, that I kind of, because it sounds a bit silly, but kind of like that I can't help making, you know.
Get into creative flow here.
Yeah, it's wonderful, this studio, because
it's a great space.
Yeah, it's
Very colourful.
And very peaceful, despite the railway, motorway, everything that's going on. But it's very sort of still building. I like it in this building.
Will you show me around a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a this is a thing that somebody gave to me, and my friend Asia, and I tied this thing around it, and I got into hysterics laughing yesterday, thinking that it looked like Rambo. You know, Rambo's got a thing where his head. Anyway, it wasn't supposed to be like that. There's a lot of sort of like tragic things that happen in here to me. A lot of laughing by myself, and there's some neighbours who've just recently moved in.
Yeah.
And it used to be just storage on both sides, and so I could have my kind of like I could sing in here, for example. I sing quite a lot, and now that there's all these people around and I can hear them literally breathing and answering the telephone, I've had to sort of tone down my behaviour in my studio.
What do you sing to me today? So these are all the colours that. Do you choose your colours? You just go with whatever comes your way, or?
I choose them. I buy my felt from a wonderful company in Germany. She's called Johanna Daimler and Daughter, and they've been going from mother to daughter since the sort of 1830s. I think.
Oh, nice! That's a lovely story. And these are from them or from someone else? Or?
These are pom-poms that are made by my friend Elena, who is who's very kind. She's a very, very old lady, and and she sits in her wonderful bed and makes pom-poms and gives them to me. And so I decided that I was going to make sort of works out of these pom-poms that she very kindly gives to me.
Do you often work in collaborations, and how do you come up with ideas of what you...
Well, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of collaborations as well. I'm doing a collaboration at the moment, a sort of fairly long-term collaboration with a Russian physicist called Kostya Novoselov, who discovered this material called graphene. So we're doing a fairly long-term project called Everything is Connected, which we've done in London at Selfridges. They put us in a glass box in the window of Selfridges, and we invited people to come and ask us questions and make suggestions to where we should do our Everything is Connected project. And we've done it in Barcelona and Manchester and all over Europe.
Interesting. Do you do a lot of different things like performance and installation and?
Yeah, I do quite a lot of installation work. I do some performance work. But also participatory performance. Did a thing at Manifesta where we got the whole city really. We did a procession from one side of the city to the other, with thousands and thousands of people dancing. I organised all these bands and then these banners, so that was.
And linking things. This looks like it's connecting lots of elements too. This is a great.
Well, this is my existential crisis artist daybed that was given to me by my friend Grant, because he said if you're going to be a woman artist, you have to be able to kind of like lie around and languish. So this is where I lie around and kind of go, oh, my life is in ruins. I'm never going to manage.
You've got all these words around you to encourage you, don't you? How do you work with words? Like, how do words work with you? Is it from childhood or now, or what's your relationship with these words?
So I've always found a home in words, and so I started out making writing out words and poems and essays to myself and sewing them into my clothes and carrying them around with me, lining my clothes with them, as it were. And then this, as I said, quite embarrassing to have you in here where they're literally like notes to myself, you know. So this is like bossing myself to not be too scattered in my way of organising my work, and that is something that Sarah Lucas said about how you have to be actually bold if you want to kind of move forward, rather than kind of what you might sometimes feel inclined to kind of just sort of like hide underneath the motorway and wait for people to come and find you, which they won't, you know. So I think my work is quite I'm trying to be constructive and socially engaged with my work, trying to make a sort of positive contribution towards building a better future. So there's not much point in doing that by myself. So I have to kind of push myself to get out there.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because you work with your hands and one thing at a time, but at the same time, then it has big effects. And I feel like the power of, you know, one thing at a time is quite yeah.
Well, it's a better way to organise yourself than three things at a time.
Yeah.
Like General Eisenhower falling down the stairs of his aircraft because, you know, people said he was too stupid to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Really?
I'm a bit like that.
That's not true. Show me how to do this. No, you're so clever. You're on the cleverest people I know. So you just cut away and see how you...
Yeah, and just kind of do whatever you like. Then my kids come in here and do watercolours, and now my daughter starts on oil paints. And we're putting up a sewing machine. My daughter's been making masks for a charity for coronavirus. It's very nice having my children in here.
Yeah.
It's very nice having you in here. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us. That's what I like.
I can go and make things because I can't, I mean, apart from endlessly cooking for my enormous family, which is, I suppose, making things, and laying the table and doing the washing up, I don't get much of a chance to do sort of like creative stuff at home. And I need to do creative stuff, like a dog needs to go for a walk or, you know, so I go and I'm a much nicer person if I spend like 6 or 7 hours by myself every day in my studio making things. And then when I make things, I'm really happy. I just love I love my work. I'm really, like every artist and every person who's, I suppose, if we're fortunate in life, we love what we do. Yeah, so that's what my studio represents to me. Also, it's a really nice building full of people who I really like. And in the context of this sort of community art week, I think it's really lovely to remember how fortunate we are to live in this great community where right underneath my studio, there's the Portobello Road. There's loads of really nice people all around who kind of drop in. There's a really profound and tight-knit community in this area of filmmakers, writers, you know, people I know. I actually, because I have the good fortune to have 3 children, I don't get much time to know anybody apart from my children. But I know that out there, you know, there are all these like interesting people, and you know, I could meet them maybe one day if I wanted to. I suppose at the moment, my priority is really, I mean, not my priority, my two priorities are like my family and my work. And I'd say my social life and my interaction with other creative people is about nil. Yeah, it's like,
But I think I've noticed that you connect with it's always related to your work somehow, you know, like when you used to spend a lot of time going to refugee camps and working with refugees, you go out to, you know,
oh yeah, no, but I love people. You know, that's not the. I love
No, no.
human nature, and I'd say quite a lot of my work's about how much I love being a human being in nature in this, I suppose, material world. And my work has origins in a Chinese literati practice of of sort of trying to understand, trying to sort of pour yourself into the world around you and get a better understanding of the world around you in order to better know yourself and give the best that you can to those around you. And then in ancient China, they used to learn from things and then write on them about what they'd learned from them. Or as artists or scholars were making things, they would inscribe their thoughts about making the thing or drawing or painting the thing on the object as they were doing it. So that's actually what I'm doing is following in that ancient Chinese practice. Although I don't always write on things, and actually less and less. I wrote a lot on all sorts of things. I write on landscapes and cityscapes, and do a lot of.
You had this big project in New York when you had people holding up signs and
yeah. I did a lot of sort of written interventions across New York City and Manchester. The Arts Council commissioned me to write all over Manchester, which was really cool. Wrote on the football museum and the cathedral, and
is some of it like guerrilla style or some of it is more, you know, because at the moment you're just finishing your exhibition at Saatchi at the end of this month, so you've got this kind of quite formal way of, you know, I am an artist at Saatchi, but I'm also a street guerrilla artist that goes out and does, you know.
Well, I looked into the legal sort of, I don't know what the word is, ramifications of writing on the street. And I found out actually very precisely once by the police came to arrest me, actually twice. And the first time was up here in my local community, which was I had permission. So I was writing about when I came back from the refugee camps. I really felt that there was something very important about trying to get across to people that even just appreciating what you have is an important political gesture, and just to sort of wake up, you know, because that's how, in part, we can start to kind of create not a better world, but maybe a world where we have more compassion for one another and try to be a bit less selfish. And the anyway, so I asked various friends to ask permission from their friends and from local businesses and youth centres and all sorts of amazing places. Everyone said yes, like in New York City, and so I had a list. It was just like literally, it was like a master list, and I divided it up into areas, and then I'd get out like 4:30 in the morning and write on buildings in felt, stuck on with a rice paste that I get from Japan, which is biodegradable, and so part of the point of it also is that it's an ephemeral artwork, so it literally is like washed off by the rain. I did a wonderful exhibition in my favourite place apart from my studio, which is the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and my work was literally being eaten by sheep and snails, and we were having to sort of like treat it with whatever it is that snails don't like, so that my work would survive for another day, you know. And we were all laughing a lot, going, "Wow, you know, that's the opposite of what normally artists should do." But I quite like the idea of putting in a lot of work and thought into something that will not remain, that'll leave no trace, because actually that's what we're like, that's what our life is like, and it's a good thing to remember that that we're just little, not even a blink in the eye of the world, and that we shouldn't take ourselves so seriously. Anyway, blah, blah, all that. Anyway, point is, I got arrested outside someone's house at about 4:30 in the morning. These two policemen, they took some very good photographs, actually. And they said, so what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm doing this thing, and I have permission. I have permission from the owner of this house. And the owner of this house didn't know me because she'd given permission to a friend of hers who so then the owner of the house came out with her husband
at 4 in the morning.
No, this was by then about like 5:15 in the morning. They were bringing it, and and she goes, oh yes, no, I do actually know her. Anyway, that forged a good friendship with this lady and her husband. And they gave me a cup of coffee, and that was it. Anyway, the point is, writing on the street is okay, so legally, if any of you want to write on the street, so long as it's impermanent and it's affixed to the building impermanently, and that you have the permission of the owner of the building, so it can't be the person who rents that building, it has to be the owner. And so long as it doesn't say anything offensive, then it is okay to write on buildings. Also, you have to get a special permit if it's going to be larger than a certain size. So, for example, in Manchester, I wrote on the facade of Selfridge's department store in letters that were, they were like 4 meters high. And then we had to have a cherry picker, and we went and wrote on the front of this enormous, very beautiful sort of Art Deco building. Looks like an old radio, It's like. So anyway, I know all about the legal things. And I got arrested in Manchester as well with a friend of mine. I mean, again, I had permission. I'd been commissioned by the City Council and the Arts Council to write all over the city and do a map and all that. And there we got arrested by like 3 teams of policemen, the local police, the environmental police, and then the social disorder.
How do you feel when that's happening to you? Do you feel relaxed about it, like I can handle it, or do you feel anxious?
I didn't have the letter on me, so it's like, oh yeah. So anyway, then we called the people from the city council, and they came and rescued us. But it was quite funny because I was doing that with a scientist who's a great scientist who discovered this property called graphene, who's like an amazing. He got a Nobel Prize and a sort of hero in Manchester. And so then the police were so thrilled to be meeting Kostya. They're all lining up to have their photograph taken and sending it to their kids. And so it sort of turned from one thing to the other. I've never actually, obviously, not obviously, but I have never been arrested and sort of taken away, because of my work. So. So,
I was about to say I had, but that's another story. I know. Distracting activity. And so, what do words mean to you? What has it been something since you were a child, or is it something that developed later on? Or I know you talked about it a little bit. But
I love words. I love language, and I love. I believe they have. They have properties for me that have a very intense and deep meaning and effect. So, and I think it's important to weigh one's words carefully and so on. And so I use words, like I didn't used to let people in my studio at all, because there's all these words that I've written for myself to kind of try and make myself be less unreasonable or whatever. Yeah, kind of.
I saw a few of them in there. They were really lovely.
Yeah. And thank you. And so words for me are a very important part of my practice. And but actually, curiously enough, less and less so. I find now I've kind of internalized a lot of the words that I wanted to kind of put out there, and now I'm kind of moving a bit towards more sort of formally sculptural work and sort of installation work. In fact, my studio, I was talking to a friend of mine about my studio, and she said, because I was saying, I'm going to get a bigger studio. And she said, but I think you've misunderstood something about your practice, which is that you think that you're this artist who makes big things in her studio, but actually you're a person who makes big things like all over the place, and you have the ideas in your studio. And I actually make small things in my studio and kind of think about things in my studio, and there's masses of books and stuff, and there's room to make a lot of stuff, but the really big things that I make, like my tent, for example, I had to make in places that are really properly big because I don't have them in my studio.
This is the tent that was outside St. Paul's, all right?
Yeah, that
Cathedral
was inside
yeah.
St. Paul's, yeah. And that's now in Spain. Yeah, now it's carrying on this. I made this artwork. Am I talking too much?
No, you're talking. No. I love it when you talk because it takes us on a journey with you.
I made this tent that was such a long story. I don't know if I've got time to tell this story, but anyway, now this tent is an artwork called My Brother's Keeper, which it took me like 3 years to make, and in the end, and then now it's on this kind of world tour, so it's amazing. Now it was in St. Paul's Cathedral, which was such an honor. I can't even speak about that. And it's been in Madrid again. Now it's going to Granada in November. It's been put on the school syllabus in Spain. How about that? I was really impressed. It's like, wow. I actually had tears in my eyes, And then they had, St. Paul's was so nice, they made it into their Christmas card last year, It's like this magic thing that happened to me. I feel like I didn't really make this tent.
You were enabling it,
it sort of made itself, and I just kind of was there, And so now it's kind of gone on its way. It's like a sort of incredibly wonderful magic child that kind of occasionally rings me and says, hey, and I'm like, oh, how's my tent? I love my tent.
But I think you're very connected to that kind of flow of things that are happening around you. Like I know that you did these talks recently about chaos and about time, and you're quite interested in that subject of time and space. And
yes, I'm very interested in, I suppose, our position in the created, in the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like such a sort of silly thing to say, but and so I'm always, I'm not always thinking about that, but I'm often thinking about that and looking at my work. So I did a podcast just now on the subject of chaos, which is the first of, I hope, many podcasts that I'll make with this same scientist, actually, and so that was a very interesting and fun project that we were recording like on holiday and during the lockdown with these funny little microphones, stuck in your pencil case. You'd think making a podcast would be quite a kind of exciting event with lots of people with black things on their ears, but it was just in my studio and mixed by this girl, Anna Gammons, who's very good. So.
I like that idea of science and art coming together, because you mentioned science earlier, about facts, and there is a kind of bridging between science and art at the moment where you can show where art is an expression of things that are quite complex on the scientific level, and art as a way of expressing them on another level. It's like, how do you feel about that dichotomy between them?
Well, I feel a bit like my work is perhaps a bit of a sort of conduit from, I get really interested in particular subjects and things, and then my work sort of channels that information to a new audience, maybe. And so it's kind of useful, I hope, in that way. And science, for me, since I made this tent, I was very, really upset, to use a mild term, about how unfair the world is. And so a lot of these a lot of the refugees and people working in this situation said to me that the message that they wanted me to convey through my tent, through this work, was I was also amazed by their generosity and courage and bravery and selflessness. And even when I asked what did people want to get across as a message through this artwork, the people said they didn't say, oh, poor us, remember us. Nobody said that at all. They said, appreciate what you have, and our life is what our thoughts make it. So I thought, taking that as to the sort of end of itself, I started to wonder well, what are the facts? If our life is what our thoughts make it, then there must be something that is concrete and that we can actually really count on and build on in our lives, and and what could those things be? Because then you've got a sort of building block to rebuild your life, as it were.
Yeah.
So I started looking at science. I went to the CERN in Geneva to see the Large Particle Collider. Went to the Seed Bank, which is an amazing place where they keep all the. There's an example of every seed in the world in one seed bank in Norway, and every seed in Europe and a lot of the world in down in the south of England in Sussex, where I went. And also, it's amazing because it's a sort of nuclear bomb proof shelter, of course, because it's got to survive. It's built to survive the end of the world, so the walls are as thick as, they're like 2 meters thick, and there's an enormous amount of sort of security and building around this seed bank, where there's just these tiny little jars. Some of the examples of plants that they have in there, plants and trees, they're only it's smaller than one of those little spice things that you get from the supermarket. It's just like these tiny little quantities of little seeds, and also very. I found that place very amazing because it was so. I love the deep poetry of the very ordinary,
Yes,
So there's this
yeah.
place which is like, a library of the created natural world, really. And all the stuff is just, it's not higgledy-piggledy, but, a lot of the little samples are in sort of really mustard pots, that the guy brought back in his backpack, sort of if they run out of pots or, and so there's sort of right through, whatever it is, time from Tesco, and it says, whatever it is, name in Latin, which is really what's inside now, and I love that place. So anyway, I kind of found science very reassuring at the end of all of this very troubling period, and so now I find it's changed because I find science and mathematics very soothing and peaceful and harmonious.
There's a logic in mathematics, isn't there? Geometrics and
Yeah.
mathematics and all of that. Yeah.
Even though actually when you talk to mathematicians and scientists, then they're all very deeply unreassuring because they're like, well, you haven't got beneath the surface of the mathematics and the science yet, because when you do, then of course you find that there's yet more unknown and nothing makes sense anymore. So at the outer edge of all of our understanding of everything, there is a lack of understanding, which I kind of have made my peace with and find quite peaceful and reassuring now as well. So I guess it's been very good for me to be an artist.
Yeah, so you can wander and touch and things.
Yeah.
But talking about reassuring, reassure us. What are you doing at the moment? What's the next phase for you now? Have you got things in the pipe work that you can let us in on?
So many things.
Give us your top 2 or 3.
Well, they kind of changed quite a lot because there were lots of things that were going to go on that were supposed to happen and then they kind of got postponed or shelved because of the coronavirus. But then it seems like even better things kind of came in their place. So we're talking with an amazing museum in Russia about having a large-scale show about chaos. With an institution in Paris. Again, you can't say what they are because there's nothing's like happened yet. There's huge private commission of doing. Somebody's got this big house, and I'm going to do all of the artwork is going to be this floor. That so paths in and out of all of the sort of buildings and down to the sea. That would be very beautiful.
In stone? Is that in stone or paths?
That's going to be in terrazzo, which is like concrete set in with other colours. So
you're experimenting with so many materials and you kind of see how it goes.
I love materials, And I just ordered some wax. I think I'm going to make things out of like wax and resin and stuff like that. Yeah. And So many things.
Well, we look forward to watching and seeing and watching everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
You
for being
too.
part of this. You know, it's been...
Oh, thank you. It's all entirely thanks to Maya, who's, by the way, an extremely distinguished filmmaker and artist in her own right. It's very nice to have met you through this project.
Actually, yeah, it's been wonderful getting to know you and actually consider you a friend now. It's been such a really meeting of minds on so many levels. Thank you for opening up your space to us.
Thank you.
And
thank you for the cake also.
The cake, yeah. Cake is the best. Let's all have cake. That's a wrap. Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's a wrap for the day, actually. So we can really have cake.
Now we can all just lie around.
Thank you for that. That was great. So interesting. Like I could talk for hours with you.